CP Academy. I am Mr. Wilson. You can find us on YouTube at CSEC Biology TCP, and to access our website, you can simply type in tcp-academy.teachable.com. Today we're going to be looking at some key terms from the CXC syllabus on the topic ecology. Last year, many students differed on their CXC exams as they were afraid of failure due to their level of readiness. This year, Mr. Wilson and his experienced team from tcpacademy.teachable.com is here to help you get exam ready. Subscribe for free to tcp-academy.teachable.com. We offer courses in CXC Biology, HSB, English Language, and many others. There are several offerings to each course. Enroll in one today. Objectives are to define ecology, environment, ecosystem. Then we're going to be distinguishing between niche versus habitat, abiotic versus biotic, species versus population, population versus community. We're also going to be citing examples for each. Let's hop right into the lesson. What's ecology? It's the study of living organisms and their interaction in the environment. Well, what's the environment? The abiotic non-living component or physical component, and the biotic, which is a living component or living factor that influences the distribution of species. Now, these are all definition and will come to life when we look further at comparing some of these. What's ecosystem to you? A community of living organisms sharing the resources of an environment. Three nice words we have defined. Now we're looking at a distinguishing terms, no longer defining. So we're looking at niche is this, while habitat is that. But in this case, we're using a table to do the comparison. So a niche is the role of an organism in the ecosystem, while habitat is a place where an organism lives. Now, this is very, very simple, it might seem at a glance. But what's role really? Now, role refers to just about everything that the organism is a part of in the ecosystem. Example, the habitat for such an organism is a part of the organism's niche. That which the organism feeds on is a part of the organism niche. The behavior of the organism, such as how does it attract mates? How does it make its nest or the place where it lives? That which it eats is a part of its niche. That which eats it is a part of its niche. Its impact on the ecosystem. Is it a pollinator? Does it keep other organism population in check, as it were with the ladybird beetle and the aphid, or the dragonfly and the mosquito? Let's look at the examples for habitat. A habitat could be a tree, the soil, a river, sea, or regions of a ecosystem, as we're to look at very hot, arid environment, a savanna, versus looking at very cold region of the polar areas. Here we're looking at examples of niche and habitat. To you, which would be the niche and which would be the habitat? What's happening to the bee on the flower? It's collecting pollen. Yes. Also nectar. Great. But in its hurry, to collect nectar, which is food, and pollen. It is also assisting the plant with being pollinated. But that's not the only thing. The possibility lies that the bee might be carrying around a pathogen from one organism to another, from one plant to another. So you're seeing a whole lot of stuff happening there as the bee moves through the ecosystem. It is also true that the bee might form food for organisms like a lizard, like a frog. So all those refers to the niche of the honeybee. However, if you were supposed to look at the picture to the right, you'll realize the bee nesting in what is called a hive, and it is pretty much on the side of a tree. So that's where it lives. That's the habitat. That's home to it. So a habitat is pretty much home, while your niche is just about everything that you do to include your home. Simply put, the habitat is simply a subset of the niche. Now, this is not for Cxc, but one might find interest looking at this. Fundamental niche versus realized niche. Now, the fundamental niche is a niche of an organism that is without limitation. It is so wide it has no limitation. The organism can just get as much of it as would have been possible. Now, it is also referred to as the pre-competitive niche because the resource is so large, competition is so small. Now, access to resources, there's a whole lot for you to take part in or for the organism to take part in. The environment where the organism can live. So it speaks about can live. There's a possibility that these things are possible. However, looking at the realized niche, you are realizing now that this is the niche that the organism actually realize or is a part of. Niche which makes the organism, all right, or it's a niche with many organisms. It fosters competition. So while in the fundamental niche the area is much larger, the resource is much larger, with the realized niche you have less resource, so you have more organism, and it breeds or allow or fosters competition, or it is also referred to as a post-competitive niche. It's a very competitive space, the realized niche. It actually allows for access to small amount of resource. Now it's important to know with the realized niche, that is pretty much that which the organism is a part of. It's like a limited domain. This is what I have. This is where I live. This is what I can afford to purchase, right? This is the type of clothes I can wear, right? This is pretty much what I can do. This is what I am doing. I am actually enjoying this set of resource. All these things are referred to as the realized niche. It's the actual environment where the organism lives and actually what the organism is doing and not what the organism can do. So the fundamental niche is about what you can do. The potential lies that you can make a $1 trillion in a day, but you are not making more than probably $1,000 per day. So that is your realized niche, making 1,000 per day. But there's always possibility that you could make more money per day. That would have been the fundamental niche. But what you're actually making is a realized niche. It's also important to note that in any habitat, while the resource might be so limited, there's always what we refer to as niche partition. There are persons who are going to be enjoying different parts of that environment. If we were supposed to look at a tree, you'll find some birds that are perched at the lower part of a plant, some that will go to the middle, while some will go right up to the top of it. So that we refer to as niche partition. Each organism pretty much realizing a specific niche. There's something about this that this organism likes, and that is where the organism will, of course, find itself. So it's the same habitat, but different organism in most cases will have different things that they pretty much prefer. If you were supposed to look at the nutrition of organism, where there are some organisms that are abiotic, there are some organisms that are heterotrophic, and there are some organisms that are saprophytic. They are all living in the same habitat, but the way they get their food is really different. That's a major partition. Then we want to look at abiotic versus biotic. And this is sometimes a problem topic, as it were, for abiotic, as students often say it's a non-living thing, so that could have been probably a piece of metal, a piece of board. But it goes beyond that. So abiotic versus biotic. Abiotic refers to the physical, or one might say non-living factor of the environment. And for the CXC syllabus, it looks at abiotic factor in three groups. One, edaphics, that has everything to do with soil. Then there's the climatic part that refers to abiotic factor, and of course the aquatic, which has to do with water. Now, importantly, one should understand that abiotic factor will influence where organisms are found, and it will pretty much influence the type of habitat that they are, the region in which they choose to pretty much build their habitat or to form their home. Then there is the biotic factor, which refers to the living component of the ecosystem that impacts another organism or help the organism to shape the ecosystem. Importantly, you're seeing VS versus, because the syllabus is saying that we should compare these words. So when you write these on your exam paper, you want to say the abiotic factor is this, while the biotic factor is that. It's not about writing two definitions, one above the other. That is pretty much defined in two words. Now you are comparing, so it's very important for the CXC syllabus for you to use that word while to show the comparison. Let's look at examples of biotic factor. Example, all the kingdoms would pretty much find themselves pretty much within the domains of biotic factor, because everything will be an offshoot from the kingdom. Now, it will impact organism distribution as they rely on each other for food and other form of supporting resource. So we gave you this definition and we gave you some examples because we wanted you to concretize this bit of information. I'm going to now drag you into some examples that are pictorial that we expect you to have a better understanding of these two words. So we'll look at abiotic factor. Now, light intensity is an abiotic factor. If we look at the temperature coming from the sun, that's also an abiotic factor. Water, whether it be water as humidity, whether it be water as in a water body, or it be soil water, once it's water, it's an abiotic factor. Then we could look at air. And remember, air is a mixture of gases. Air is a mixture of gases. And particularly for the CXC syllabus, we are looking at nitrogen, oxygen, carbon dioxide. So all these three components of the air is very, very important to know, to understand, as it were, as a biotic factor. We're going to be talking more about them as we go deeper into the syllabus. Now, soil and all that it has to offer, including minerals and so on, like magnesium, the plant will be using magnesium for photosynthesis. Soil is a very important abiotic factor. We could look at the salinity of the soil, we could look at the water content of the soil, but soil, as we spoke about, edaphics, is a very important part of the abiotic factor. Then we look at the mineral that is associated with the soil. This is also another type of abiotic factor. We could look at pH of the soil. That is also another abiotic factor. And temperature of the soil, or temperature of the ecosystem, temperature of the environment, those are all examples of abiotic factor. It's a little different when we look at biotic factor, as we're looking now at the living component of the ecosystem. And to make it easy, we just spoke about the kingdom and all the derivatives there from the kingdom. So we could look at fungi, which are, of course, decomposers. One would say they are fungi and bacteria, they are decomposers. Then we look at plants, they are autotrophic organisms in our ecosystem. And then we could look at animals. The particular animal we're looking at there is a tapeworm, which is, of course, parasitic to other animals. Then we could look at the bacteria, which is, of course, a prokaryote. And some of these are good, while some may be really harmful to other organisms. Now we are looking at the products. Pretty much we're looking at the euglena there. The popular one for the CXC syllabus is the amoeba. Now lastly, we could look at this controversial organism which is called a virus. It cannot exist on its own. However, when it gets into a host, it becomes a problem. Now all viruses are parasitic. All viruses will cause harm to an organism. So for that, all these six organisms, I'd prefer to say, are the five kingdom plus virus are classified under biotic factor with the derivatives such as competition, so on and so forth, are all under biotic. You're seeing the plant, you're providing food. Then we move on to species versus population. What does that mean to you? One would say that species is the most basic term of a ecosystem. Now, a species or species refer to a group of individuals of common ancestry that are closely related to each other and can interbreed to produce viable slash fertile offspring. And that extract there comes pretty much from the CXC syllabus. Simply put, species refer to organisms that are able to interbreed, and the offspring must be able to produce offspring that themselves can interbreed. So, for example, you would have the mule, and you'd have the mule being a hybrid from a horse and a donkey, but the mule itself cannot produce an offspring, which make it very easy for us to state that the horse and the donkey, they are not of the same species, because they were not able to produce a viable offspring. Even though they were able to produce an offspring, that offspring cannot produce an offspring of its own. Then there is population. And when we talk about population, it's closely related to niche, to the species. When we talk about population, it is closely related to species. And why? Because a population is made up of only one type of species, one type of organism. So it refers to a member of a particular species living in a particular habitat. So it must be one type of organism. Let's look at this example. So you are seeing species there in its smallest unit with the two zebras. So that's a species. But when we have a group of this, a whole lot of them in an area, then we refer to it as a population. So if you were supposed to talk about Mr. Wilson, I am a species, all right? Or you could say that's a species of the human population, our species of human. But if you were supposed to look at all the people in Jamaica, all the people in the world, then we'd be talking about population. We wouldn't use species again. When we have that large number, we would say it's a population. So when we're looking at the unit, species. When we are looking at the unit in its entirety with a whole lot, we say population. So there we have species, population. Then we have to look at population versus community. For those students who fail to study and they are probably social studies students, they usually give a definition for community that has nothing to do with biology. So let's look at this very quickly. Population refers to member of a particular species living in a particular habitat. So this is one type of organism. When we look at community, it's a little different in that now we're looking at many different types of species living together. So it refers to all the population of different species found living in a particular habitat, and that's an extract from the CXC syllabus, directly from the syllabus. So we are comparing here, so we must say population is what it is, while community is whatever it is. We want to know these. These are directly from the syllabus, the CXC syllabus that students are supposed to know in all 16 Caribbean territories that are sitting the CXC exam. Here's our example. Which is population? Which is community? Which of a picture depicts population? Which depicts community? So that was very, very easy for you. Since you've seen it before, population, many zebras living together. But if we were supposed to look at community, it speaks to all the many different types of organisms living pretty much in the same habitat. So there we have the duck, we have the zebra, we have, I don't know if that's a gorilla, and there we have something like some reindeer or gazelle, and then we have a rabbit, and we have the beetles there that are controlling the aphid. We have a frog. We have some plants of different type. There we have the elephant. So all these organisms living together makes up a community. You'll observe that it's many different type of species, many different type of population that makes up this. That takes us to the end of a presentation for distinguishing ecological terms. I am Mr. Wilson from TCP Academy. You can find us at tcp-academy.teachable.com. This presentation was made possible by TCP Academy. You can also find us on YouTube at CSEC Biology TCP. Minded to like, share, and subscribe. Thanks much for watching.